Well, good morning, HASP, Hope Academy of Senior Professionals. So it's April. I'm going to read a little passage about the seasons, just rather than saying the typical things, oh, it's raining, it's cold, whatever. And this was from a little book review that I was perusing, getting ready for my book club. And it's from Nick Groom. It talks about the English year and the seasons. Once the annual cycle of the seasons must have seemed eternal and indomitable. The year moved from the bird song and the flowers of spring through summer's work of harvesting and husbandry to autumnal stock taking and into the icy challenge of winter. Every year was different, but the pattern of the seasons was consistent. But now everything is changing. The seasons are blurring. They no longer have such apparently distinctive beginnings and ends. Winters can be unpleasantly warm, and summers uncomfortably wet and windy, and the months are no longer readily defined by what weather they may bring. So just a little thought, different idea. Our seasons, the changing environment. So what's happening on 8th? I want to start out by saying it was really awesome, as the students say, to receive this really nice email last month that Kim forwarded to you from Dr. Knapp. You know, he was here last month doing a presentation on the strategic plan of Hope College. And I was just so happy to get that letter because I think it really sealed the deal about his appreciation of HASP. And his letter, if you remember, said, there are many reasons that Hope College remains worth the investment for families and the community's members alike. Having engaged lifelong learning program like HASP is certainly one of them. So I think we need to give ourselves some applause. That was just really nice to comment for HASP, and it's good. Onto the curriculum, I had a really nice opportunity to take the class called Miracles of Survival. It was a very moving presentation coordinated by Dave Brower. For those of you who did not attend, the speaker was of Jewish heritage, and he was a personal friend of David's. He's living in Canada now, and he shared his own miracle of survival, and he had a book where he had several stories in. So he escaped with his parents from communist Hungary in 1950 and then immigrated to Canada at the age of 12. So at the end of the presentation, we had an additional nice surprise. David Brower spontaneously invited all the people in his class to come out to his home to further converse with the speaker and ask questions. And coupled with that, he said there was going to be a little food there, some blank and cheese, so whatever goes with cheese he was serving. So I thought that was a really nice gesture, thank you. But I was thinking about it, and I thought to Dave, wow, that's a spur-of-the-moment invitation. Have you talked to your other half about this? And you know, potentially 80 people showing up at your doorstep. And so I thought to myself, well, Dave, you're really going to have a miracle of survival story if your wife doesn't know that you planned this. But I thought that was a really nice way to end that classroom. You never know with HASP, you get surprises all the time. And so that was just really a great opportunity. Just real quickly, I want to thank everyone who's volunteering. They're assisting their time at West Ottawa to proctor the international boards and the AP exams in late April. There's a few of us that are going. I was very happy to be able to help out, although I was signed to proctor the calculus exam. But a good thing with proctoring is you don't have to go up and talk to the students. You're not allowed to do that, so I would never, you know, survive that. But thank you all for those who are participating. So you have an energetic crowd here today, so to talk about energy, I think you're going to have a really good group. Let me see. Everybody got the notice about the elevator now with Workman. You don't have to go outside. It's written in the bulletin. You can take the elevator from inside now. The construction is done, so that's a good thing. I'm done. Thank you. We have a nice program, but I really want to give you opportunity to talk to Dave and ask questions, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions to ask. Before we start our program, I'm going to have Betty Voskel come up, and she's going to introduce our new members and also our guests.
Good morning. It's my privilege to introduce 12 guests this morning. And so when I read your name, if you would just stand wherever you are, that would be great. Cindy Helder. Where are you hiding? Oh, right there, Cindy. Okay, great. Lorraine Griffin. Ah, there she is. Great. A visitor. Okay. Adolph Wolf. Way in the back. Great. Ann Half. Brewster Beek. Chet Pollock. Great. Barbara Bright. Diane Schumann. Did I do that right, Diane? Thank you. Glenn Jeffrey. Ken Austin. Doesn't have his trumpet with him. Shoot. Frank Kearney. Oh, there you are, Frank. Okay. Joan Kearney. Thank you. Let's give all of our guests a round of applause. And then it's also my pleasure to introduce 15 new HASP members this month, and I'm going to ask them to come up here after I read your names. Michael Curtin, Sharon Curtin, Linda Walvard DeVelder, Chris Gamble, Carl Heineken, Lou Ann Kaiser, Gordon Mitchell, Mary Jo Oren, glad you found a parking space, and Robert Oren, we were waiting for you. Angela Scripps, Pat Scripps, Carla Sturk, Vern Sturk, Carl Verta, and Karen Weingarten. We have to wait for Karen here, and then we're going to give these people a big round of applause. Don't you think 15 people deserve a big round of applause?
Thank you all and welcome to HASP. We're really happy to have you join our group. At this time, we'd like to have Andre Canal come up as a member of our program committee, and she will introduce our speaker in our program.
Thanks. Good morning and welcome. There is truly a lot of energy in the room today. And Dave brought in a bottle of water, and we had to correct that, make sure that he was drinking Holland water. So before I moved to Holland, I lived and worked in Detroit. I paid my electric bill via U.S. Postal Office. I sent a check in to the Detroit Water Department to pay for the water, and as far as wastewater treatment went, the only thing I knew about that was how to flush a toilet. With the exception of being the public relations manager of a major nonprofit in Detroit, whose chairman of the board was the CEO of Detroit Edison, and occasionally would write speeches for him and letters to the editor, I was just one of the many customers of Detroit Edison, not a stakeholder and not a stockholder. Moving to Holland, I found a municipally owned utility, operated by the same people that sit next to you in church, stand in line at the grocery store, pump gas at the same gas station. It's a responsive, not-for-profit service. I went to the BPW to be their communications person, whereupon I met Dave Koster, who had started an internship while finishing his BS in mechanical engineering from Michigan Tech University. Dave and I became friends. We both worked long hours. He was hired in as a power supply engineer in 1991, where he was responsible for the management of wholesale power transactions and capital and maintenance projects. I bet at that time you didn't realize you would be taking on a major, major capital project. Always a team player, in 1995 he was promoted to the production engineer supervisor position, and then in 1998 the power resources director and operations director in 2007, where he was responsible for the plant operations functions of water, wastewater, and the electric utilities. In 2011, in December of 2011, Dave was named general manager. Speaking from a customer perspective, having a municipal utility serve you means accountability, accessibility, reliability at a low cost. From a communications perspective, Dave Koster is a PR person's dream come true. He is knowledgeable on all aspects of the utility business. He has a good understanding of our community's needs. He is always accessible and responsive to various publics, whether they be employees, customers, the news media, board members, council persons. And as an example of that, the program committee had wanted to get Dave to come and speak, although he had spoken here about 4 years ago. And, but all the things that the BPW is doing, people wanted to hear, get an update. And Dave's schedule is very busy. And so we kept trying to get a commitment of a date, and we finally got that commitment, and it was April. And then about a month ago, Dave realized that that was during spring break. And Dave is a very family man. He's both very personable and very committed to not only the community, but to his family. And so he started spring break last week, going to visit a son up at Michigan Tech. He came back, he's presenting today, and he leaves to go back to visit schools with his other child. Please join me in welcoming Dave Koster.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Wow, what a great group. This is a lot of fun to be here this morning. I remember 4 years ago, I had such a great time presenting at that time as well. So I'm really looking forward to this morning. Thank you so much, Andre. That was very kind. I have been flying around the state a little bit. My daughter is a junior in high school, so she's starting to think about colleges now and going through all of the work and some of these tests that are being proctored maybe by some of you. She'll be taking here shortly as well. So looking forward to that. We've got a lot of things going on here in our community. It is your utility. I do want to emphasize that. I think Andre laid that out very well, the differential between an investor-owned utility and that there's a number of stockholders that will receive a dividend and are seeing the benefit of the capital investments that are being made. Every dollar, if you're a customer of the Holland BPW, every dollar that is spent goes into the infrastructure to support a reliable, low-cost service to you, and it goes right back into your community. You are our stockholders, you are our stakeholders, and you do have that voice because we have a board of directors that is there responsive to your needs and aware of also what the community needs are. And we have a city council that we ultimately report to. So a lot of things happening. When I came into the general manager position 5 years ago, I knew that we were coming into a period of some significant capital investment in our utilities. I didn't know just how much that was actually going to be, and it turns out that we have this confluence of a number of things happening. So I'm going to spend time talking about Holland Energy Park and power generation. I know that that's of a lot of interest to you. But we have a lot of other things going on. So the PowerPoint presentation covers really the water utility, wastewater utility, and this emerging new utility that we're bringing about called broadband or fiber optics as well. So we'll kind of cover all that. Really look forward to this being interactive. And I know there'll be a lot of questions as we move along. I've also tried to keep it somewhat hopefully interesting to you by letting me talk a little bit less and having a couple videos to actually show some things along the way. So what is going on? There's a number of things happening. I do want to talk about power generation, but really it's important to understand that that's within the context of a broader 40-year community energy plan. we're working to become a world-class energy efficient city, and it's more than just power generation that'll take us there, so I'll get to that. One of the enabling mechanisms that you may not know about, but is launched and underway to help become that energy efficient city is called on-bill financing. What is that? Well, it has to do with home energy improvements and being able to finance that through your electric bill. Talk about that in a little bit. Holland Energy Park will be a big game changer in terms of both cost effectiveness and energy efficiency, environmental stewardship for our power supply. And we'll talk about the broadband pilot that we've got going on downtown and what our thoughts are about fiber going forward. Wastewater. Andre said she knew just to flush the toilet. We've kind of had a tagline that, we'll take it from here kind of thing, and I think everybody's just fine with that. And so, hopefully we're a little bit far away from the breakfast hour that we can talk about that. But an important investments being made over there as well. And then we've got some community collaboration that we do want to highlight on our water infrastructure and tying in with other communities to increase reliability and then cost effectiveness going forward. And then how are we improving this for you as customers? We do have a few projects in that regard as well. So before we start, I don't want to take it for granted that everybody understands that our utility is locally owned and operated. Some don't know that. Matter of fact, as a board member of the American Public Power Association, I have become aware through some of the surveys that they've done that sometimes a very small number of people understand that this is a local, not-for-profit utility. But it is. We are owned by the City of Holland. We were put in place through charter, the city's charter, to actually run these businesses for you, for our utilities for here in Holland. We serve electric, water, wastewater, and broadband. And our area that we serve is the City of Holland for all of those utilities, and then different sections, but outside the cities as well. The 4 contiguous townships are served from electric standpoint, and then other areas as we get into the wastewater. We'll talk about that in a little bit. What also is interesting is I think that Holland is blessed with a very strong, diverse, vibrant business community. If you look at our electric generation and our electric sales, 82% of our power is supplied to businesses here in this community. So you think about that. We need to make sure that we've got low-cost, reliable power to keep those businesses vibrant, to keep the jobs here in town, and so we understand the important role that the BPW plays. In setting that up in the charter, I think our forefathers, our founding fathers here in the community were very astute. They actually established an independent board of directors to run this as enterprises, as individual businesses, as opposed to being caught up within budget making and other constraints that the city might be facing in the administration of some of their general services. And so we do have that 5-member board. I want to give a strong shout out to Tim Hemingway as our board chair. If you know Tim in the community, he's very active, very involved in a number of things, and a very strong business leader. Phil Miller also is on our board. Paul Elzinga, Jim Story, and Diane Hayworth are our voting members. And then we have actually a member from the surrounding townships. As we do serve in those townships and as our demand has grown in those townships, we've brought in an ex officio non-voting member from those areas as well. Bob Shalander currently serves that role. And we have some support from our city council as a liaison there and our city manager. So I did want to talk about the community energy plan, becoming a world-class energy efficient city. What does that really mean? Well, we took a look back in 2010. Holland has a sustainability committee, and they wanted to identify how could we move the needle on energy supply and use in our community long term. So we looked at what our current situation was, and we measured it really by our carbon intensity. We're using per capita about 24 metric tons per year when we started this road back in 2010. We wanted to get to a strategy that was more sustainable, looking at some of the climate data that was out there, and the Council of Mayors work and some of the international groups had identified something closer to 10 metric tons as being a goal for a community. Pretty big goal for us because remember, 82% of our power is used by industries. Not all communities have that same thing. So if we got to 10 metric tons and we had all that industrial use going on in our community, that would be quite astonishing and quite good in terms of our contribution to helping the planet long term. Also, we want to make sure that people understand that there's a value proposition associated with this energy efficiency. It's not just intended to cost more. Matter of fact, in a lot of cases, it can, in the long run, be more cost effective. And so we developed a plan to try to get there. It looked at a number of different scenarios to do that. We actually had a very integrated approach, and you'll see all through this slide presentation that we had stakeholder involvement throughout the process. The high-level goals of the community energy plan were to make sure that we are competitive in our energy supply. So we're not forsaking any of that as we're doing these other initiatives. We'll make sure that that's first and foremost, and also that we're attractive to business, and at the same time being protective of the environment. 7 different task forces are underway, have been underway for the last few years, looking at things like district energy. How can we take some of the waste heat from our processes? Everybody knows about our snowmelt system downtown, right? Well, how can we take that and use it even more for building heat potentially? How can we improve the building structures in our community to make them more efficient? Because you might think that buying a new furnace and upgrading the efficiency of that furnace is the best thing you can do. But if your house leaks incredibly, then that new furnace really doesn't do a whole lot for you. Sealing your home is one of the first things that you ought to do. So how can we make sure that we're improving our building environment as well, not only on the residential side, but on the commercial and industrial? How can we get education out there? And this was a collaborative effort that we've moved forward on with Hope College. Holland and Hope College have formed a Sustainability Institute. And part of that Sustainability Institute is to help get message out on the progress being made on the community energy plan. And certainly, power generation is also a big part of that. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on power generation. But first of all, I want to spend time talking a little bit more about the home energy retrofits as well. So your building environment, we talked about trying to improve that. Our goal in the community energy plan was try to get to 50% savings in each home in the community. Who you see there is Peter Bogart. Some of you might know Peter. Peter is very active in the community and is now working part-time for the city, going around meeting homeowners that are interested in making home energy improvements in their home, and he is helping with the process associated with that. So what we've established here in Holland is actually a program where you can do an upgrade on your home. If you do more than $10,000 of upgrades associated with energy efficiency, there are significant rebates associated with that. This year, we're at about a 20% rebate. So if you spend $10,000, you get $2,000 back right off the bat. And then beyond that, there are other incentives, such as being able to finance that through your electric bill. So we've launched this program. We are the first municipality in the state to do so. We've worked very closely with our local legislators to put a bill in place a couple of years ago to enable us to do this. And we have now launched a non-bill financing program. It is available either on the city's website or our website if you have an interest in it. Well, why is on-bill financing important? Well, there's a lot of different ways that you can finance an improvement on your home, and most of those would require that if you sold your home, you would have to exhaust that loan. You'd have to pay it off completely. Well, with an on-bill financing, it's a little bit different. The barriers to getting a loan are different because all you have to have is 12 months of on-bill payment history. You have to have no bankruptcies, no liens against you, and no tax delinquency with the city. And so, those are kind of interesting criteria as opposed to having a FICO score and doing something else with your traditional bank. If you have that, what we've set up is a Holland Energy Fund. It's a division of the City of Holland. It's owned by the City of Holland. And it has about $3 million of capital that has been placed there by the Holland Board of Public Works for the loans in the home, in homes, for home improvements. And with that, the on-bill financing, what it allows is different as well, because if you say, well, I'm not going to be there for more than a couple years, I'm not sure that I really want to do this and then pay off the loan right away in a couple of years. The reality is, with the on-bill financing, that loan can stick with the meter and can actually transfer to the next owner of the home. So there's a lot of barriers that have been reduced as it relates to that. So it's our way of trying to move the needle and to get to that 50% savings. The customers that have done this to date, the homeowners that have done this to date, the average investment is around $16,000 per home, and the average savings has been about 34%. So really good progress being made on this program so far, and it's just getting started. So Holland Energy Park has been an amazing ride here for the last 4 years. We started this process soon, well, actually right as I was transitioning into the general manager position. And you know, we said that this really has to be a community decision on how we were going to do this. And so we launched a process called P21, Power for the 21st Century. Andre was still with us, I think, when we launched P21. And it was really focused on trying to make sure that we raised the literacy on energy issues in our community to allow our entire community to be part of that collaborative process of weighing in on our power supply decisions. We had public education meetings. You know, we had stakeholder sessions. We launched a Twitter site, a YouTube site, and a Facebook site, and everything that we could do to try to reach people any way possible. And because of that, it allowed us to also do what I thought was an amazing process called sustainable return on investment. So we evaluated our generation options different than traditional utilities have done, where they look at, well, it's going to cost this much to build it and this much to operate it, and I've got other options available to me. We went beyond that because it truly is a resource for the community. When we think about what we did back in 1940 with James D. Young, the power plant on 3rd and Pine, our coal plant, you know, there was a big decision, community decision that was made there. It was a collaborative decision. And since that time, that resource has served us very well. But one of the things that it's done for this community is it's provided kind of a commercial harbor status. And so if we stop bringing coal, would there be a risk to the loss of federal dollars for dredging? That's not the kind of thing that normally gets evaluated in a power supply decision. Our snowmelt is being supplied by the James Young plant. So if we decided not to build anything new, how would we supply the snowmelt going forward? That's not always part of a normal power supply decision. But here, it was. And so we did a sustainable return on investment analysis. And what that does is it allows us to look at the environmental, social, and economic impacts of all of our decisions. And you see the little curves down on the right. Well, they look interesting, but essentially what it means is everything is probabilistic. You know, we don't know what the price of natural gas is going to be tomorrow, but it could be between here and here, you know, as a probable range. We don't know what the social or environmental impacts of emissions from different power supply resources are exactly. There's still a lot of literature and a lot of research going on in that regard, but it's probably between here and here. So everything kind of came down to some probabilistic analysis, but in the end, something really bright line sort of emerged, and that was natural gas combined cycle technology. And I've got a sheet here on your desk. If you're interested in how that works, we're going to talk about it in a little bit, but it's also there for you if you want to see that. I've got a short video next that kind of shows the outcome of this process. Remind you that this was about 3-4 years ago, so you know, kind of keep that kind of context in mind.
Holland has always been a community that works hard, and for more than 100 years, the Holland Board of Public Works has supplied the power to keep our town growing. As our community grows, so does our need for power. By 2016, the increased demand for power for our homes and businesses will exceed our baseload generating capacity. Over the past several years, we have considered a number of ways to meet our community's need for more baseload power. It's a complex question. Last year, we hired HDR, a global independent consulting firm, to help us conduct an exhaustive sustainable return on investment study. It looked at affordability and reliability, but also at the social, economic, environmental, and health impacts of a variety of options. The HBPW belongs to the community. Our process included people from all across our city to make sure their voices were heard. Their input helped keep us on track for integrating our new power generation with Holland's Community Energy Plan. We looked at a lot of options, everything from state-of-the-art solid fuel generation to renewables to purchasing primarily from the grid. One of the most promising solutions comes from combined cycle natural gas technologies. Natural gas is plentiful, affordable, and cleaner than other alternatives. With local generation, the HBPW can expand the services that make downtown great. Things like the snow melt system that keeps streets clear during winter, and district heating that could heat hundreds of homes and businesses. Clean, affordable power is essential to the success of Holland's innovative community energy plan, and we are well on our way. There's work left to be done, but we're excited about the direction we're headed. As we move forward, you can count on the Holland Board of Public Works to keep Holland working.
So that was quite an amazing process we went through. I do want to highlight a little bit what was touched on there. Why is combined cycle technology an important choice for Holland? The fuel source is one. That's natural gas. There's been a significant change in the economics associated with natural gas because of the emergence of hydraulic fracturing. And it is a game changer. If you look at the Marcellus and Utica shales in Pennsylvania, Ohio area, they are now probably the dominant source of supply for natural gas in our country. A lot of pipeline capacity is being added here in the Midwest to get that out of there, and because of that, Holland sits in a position where it can be a very significant beneficiary of the costs associated with that. So there's a cost benefit. Additionally, natural gas has no sulfur in it. So there's no sulfur dioxide emissions. There's no particles as you would have in coal. So there's no fine particulate matter or coarse particulate matter really associated with that. Also, because it's natural gas, it has lower nitrogen oxide emissions as well. So all of the different constituents. And then if you think about climate change and carbon, it's 50% just on the fuel itself, and then you look at the efficiency of the unit, we're probably doing much better than 50% savings per every megawatt hour that we would produce with the combined cycle power plant. Why is it so efficient? Well, essentially what it does is it uses a jet engine on the front end of it. It's basically the same thing that hangs under the wing of a large aircraft. And we send the natural gas through it and some compressed air, we fire it. And coming through that, then it forces the blades to turn and turn a generator to make power, which is not new technology. That's been around for some time. Matter of fact, we have a few of those on the southeast side of town. But what comes off the back end of those generators is about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit of exhaust gases. So we say, hey, wait, capture some of that heat. Make use of it to make steam and then run that through a steam turbine. And that's exactly what's happening here. If you see the jet engines, the boiler, and then the steam turbine, we're essentially with the same molecule of natural gas, we're getting 50% more output of electricity than we would if we didn't have the boilers on the back end capturing that heat. And then if you look further to the, if you're looking at it, it'd be on the right-hand side of that diagram, you see that we'll also have to reject the heat from the steam ultimately. Well, we do have a cooling tower over there, but our preference in the wintertime is to make use of another rejection capability, and that's our snowmelt system. So our snowmelt system actually had about 480,000, I think it was, square feet of heated area, or about 2.9 miles of walkable area here before we did 9th Street and part of 8th Street and Central Avenue. That now is up to 4.9 miles of walkable area. We're up over 600,000 square feet. And this new unit that we put in could actually grow the snowmelt system from about 5 times what it actually was when it got started. So we're capable of getting up to about 2 million square feet overall. So we've got a pretty good potential. We could use it for snowmelt, or also we could use it for building heat. At the Civic Center, part of the renovation work that's being done there, they're going to take the snowmelt water. They're going to run that snowmelt water, which is going to be an elevated temperature than what groundwater would be. They're going to run it through a heat pump to run the heat for their building there. So again, same molecule of gas that went in at the combustion turbine being used for power, then the waste heat being used for steam, then that waste heat being used for snowmelt, and then that waste heat being used for heating a building. And so you can see the economics of that and the environmental impact of that, and that's why combined cycle technology is such a good choice for Holland. We also, though, didn't want to just say that that's all we're doing. We believe that an integrated portfolio of resources is a good option for us, and so we have integrated some renewable resources. Wildcat Wind Farm down in Windfall, Indiana, sounds like a good place to build a wind farm, is part of our resources now. We actually get contracted power off from that wind farm. Also a farm over in Ithaca, Michigan, in the middle of the state. We're getting some power from that, and we have some contracts with different landfills. Landfills will break down material over time, create methane. You can capture that methane and you can actually burn it, make electricity, and some of the landfills do that. And so we have some renewable resources. Matter of fact, our renewable portfolio stands at about 15% of our power supply now. We have beat the state's mandates by many years, and we're about 5%, or the mandate right now is 10%, and we're already at 15 associated with that. A lot of you might be interested in what's happening with the James DeYoung plant. We're actually looking at eventually probably a full decommissioning. In the interim, what we did is back last April, we stopped burning coal there. Because environmental regulations that we were going to be facing required us to put significant investments in a plant that was already between 50 and 70 years old, essentially, but, based upon the number of generating units that are there. We decided not to do that. It was not cost effective. It was not consistent with our long-range community energy plan goals as well. However, two of the units that are there are capable of burning natural gas as a main fuel as well. Not very efficiently, and certainly they can't be started and stopped as quickly as Holland Energy Park, but they are capable of doing that. So we actually left two of them available to us as we're building Holland Energy Park, because every utility in the country has an obligation to make sure that each year it has enough contracted or owned power supply to meet its peak demand plus a certain reserve margin, because nobody wants the power to go out if resources aren't available. So from a planning perspective, you have to have enough, even in standby. So they're serving a standby role for us right now. We've actually submitted a price that it would take for us to keep them around, and there's a potential that others that need more power yet this year may be able to say to us that, yeah, they're willing to pay that. If that happens, and we'll find out later this month if that happens, they'll stay around for another year. If that doesn't happen, I think we need to have a very important community conversation, because we need to get into the decommissioning process. And my question to the community is there a need for this building in some other regard? A lot of other communities have repurposed power plants into other uses, mixed use, whether it's office space and restaurants or other things. You've seen that in other areas where that's happened. Is that the right fit for Holland? Is it not? It impacts the way that we're going to approach the decommissioning, so that's going to be a very important conversation that could be coming up. And then I mentioned the combined cycle plant, is really kind of that next thing. So it's important to also understand that not only was the P21 and the SROI, the Sustainable Return on Investment, a collaborative process, but our next process was as well, and that was picking a site and then deciding what the architectural elements in the site plan were for that site. We did pick the area here on the east part of town. It actually straddled Holland Township and City of Holland. Fairbanks was the dividing line. I want to give a lot of thanks to Holland Township for helping us bring part of that property into the City of Holland so that we could have one common jurisdiction involved in it. It was 26 acres of property and about 61 parcels of property that we had to acquire. I'm pleased to say that we did every acquisition without the use of eminent domain. And we did that because we used a very fair and responsible process in acquiring the property. There were some mixed use in there. There were some small businesses. There were some residences in there, and one large factory. It was a former home furnace site at one point. Later became atmospheric processing. I don't know if Alan and Gail Herring attend these at all or not, but these events. But Alan and Gail were the owners of that facility. They had repurposed it into some smaller sections where it was leased out. And so we had to help relocate some of those businesses as well. And so it was a very sensitive process that we went through. And then there was a lot of cleanup that we had to do there as well. But all along, we had this vision of what we were trying to do ultimately. And you see three main goals that emerged from it were that we wanted to build a world-class resource first and foremost. But we also had an opportunity to enhance the gateway. It's our eastern gateway of the community. We wanted to make sure that what we did would help that. And then finally, we wanted to create a destination. And that's why you see the name Holland Energy Park there. That's not a name that's given to a lot of power plants. But in this case, because of the 26 acres and the ability to use an area outside the secure perimeter for walking trails, to enjoy the best practices in stormwater management that we're going to be using on site, to appreciate the sustainable native plantings of grasses that we're going to have around there, it was an opportunity for us to create a park-like environment. A couple slides later, you'll see that we're also creating a destination inside the plant, a visitor center. We've had a number of tours for our facilities over the years, whether it's groups like yours that I know are going to be coming through the power plant construction upcoming, but a lot of school groups as well. And so we had an opportunity in building this plant to be intentional. What would be the best representation to help us with those tours? And so we're working on that as part of the building process. And I believe, I don't know if this next one is the video yet or not. Nope, this is just a couple slides showing the demolition that's going on here. Here you see the site beforehand with the mixed use in the lower right-hand corner, some of the demolition that we had to do. We also tried to be very intentional about taking the opportunity to work with the community in a lot of ways as we were working with this. We actually had SWAT teams come in, do exercises in these buildings. They were vacant, they were available, why not make use of it? We had fire department come in and do rescue simulations. They did a rooftop fire so they could simulate how to deal with an actual roof fire. And so we tried to take advantage of each and every one of these things along the way to not miss an opportunity. We repurposed a lot of materials, crushed concrete, asphalt. We donated a lot of other elements, working with Jubilee Ministries, a couple of fixtures in buildings that were there, and donated other materials and recycled as well. And so I think this next one might be the video that kind of shows the summary of that effort. Nope, sorry, one more. Keep you in suspense. The other thing we did is we worked with at-risk youth in the community. We actually, there's a program through Escape Ministries that we brought some kids in. They helped us with areas outside of the main construction site where we wanted to support the trail system that's going to be developed to the north of the facility. And actually, before I'm going to tease you a little more with that, I want to go back to this picture here because if you look, you can see the walking trail. A pedestrian trail is this outside area. Directly to the north is a very interesting property that's owned by the Macatawa Greenway. It's a pond or a wetland area back there. And the Macatawa Greenway for years has been working on a pathway throughout our community, throughout that Macatawa corridor. They are very excited about the work that we're doing with our walking trails because they're doing a fundraiser activity now where they're looking at taking off from our trails to go along the riverfront and then also building a pedestrian tunnel underneath the CSX rail that you see going and bordering the west end of the property. And that would allow pedestrian access into Windmill Island. Really neat story, though, is that back in the turn of the 1900s century, the early 1900s, the interurban that brought people from Jenison, Grand Rapids area out to the lakeshore, that's the path of the interurban. So there's a low section on the north side of our property, and it's interesting that now we're developing a trail system throughout Ottawa County that previously brought people from Grand Rapids or from that part of the county to the lakeshore, just a different way of doing that. And so it's very exciting to see some of that effort. That's something that the at-risk youth were working on. We're planting some myrtle and other stabilizing vegetation for that.
Over
Here's the
most of
video.
a century, a 26-acre district in Holland, Michigan existed largely out of mind, bordering on a scenic wetland. The area had for decades stood in contrast to the community's expanding sense of environmental responsibility. In 2013, the Holland Board of Public Works concluded a 2-year energy planning process with the decision to build a clean-burning natural gas plant on the eastern edge of the city, in the same district that had long been environmentally neglected.
The site of the Holland Energy Park is a part of our community that, for a long time, was sort of unknown to many of us. In many ways, it was a part of our community that maybe has been neglected for some time. One of the exciting things about what we're doing there now is it not only will be a focal point of our community, but it's going to be a park and a place that we'll all be able to look at, enjoy, and really take pride in.
The Holland Energy Park was envisioned as a showcase for sustainable power generation. Clean burning, efficient, and affordable, the facility would allow the BPW to retire aging coal-burning generators that had long powered the city.
Not only is it going to be a world-class power resource for the community, but it's going to be a destination for people to be able to come and view the facility in a number of different angles. We're going to connect to a lot of different natural trails and systems that are around the park, give people views of wetlands, give people an access point to really tie into hopefully an eventual Macatawa Greenway system.
First, there was work to be done.
Some of the contamination we found was threatening to the environment because the soil contamination could threaten groundwater resources by leaching. And, it had concrete, rubble, miscellaneous soils, tires, and things of that nature that we found a lot more extensive than we anticipated.
As the cleanup and demolition began, the team started removing waste from the site. It included 590 tons of metal, over 12,000 tons of concrete, 11 tons of asbestos-containing materials, and over 350 discarded tires.
We believe conservation of resources should be a part of every project. So as we got into this and started doing the demolition work, we have cleaned that up, picked it up, disposed of what needed to be disposed of properly. If it was metal, we recycled it. If they were tires, we recycled. All the tires that we pulled out of here went to a recycling facility. Concrete, pads, foundations. We ended up with 25,000 cubic yards of crushed concrete.
All of the concrete recovered at the site will be reused in preparing the site for the new park. Also, the BPW repurposed any removed trees by donating them to local nonprofits or by mulching them for the landscape. However, not all plant life at the location was fit for reuse. Japanese knotweed has been described as one of the world's worst invasive species. Deeply rooted and amazingly resilient, the knotweed has displaced native plants all across the site and presented an ongoing threat to the bordering wetlands.
We actually have two kinds of knotweed. We have Japanese knotweed and we have giant knotweed. They're insidious. They grow roots that are 15 feet deep and send rhizomes or tendrils out over 60 feet. We've engaged the Outdoor Discovery Center for the next 3 years to work with us to do both a chemical treatment plan as well as just physically removing it.
Eliminating the knotweed was an important step in restoring the site and adjacent wetlands. In addition, the project called for the reestablishment of viable populations of threatened, endangered, and species of concern, from plants to insects, animals, and birds. Project biologists studied how to protect existing species and restore native habitat that would allow reintroduced species to thrive.
For a long time, I had seen the plans for what was going to be happening in that location. I think even I was surprised that once the site was cleared and made ready for the new construction to take place, really how open and beautiful the location is. I'm only now really beginning to understand what we're going to see for the next generation as we enter into downtown.
The site for the Holland Energy Park is moving from neglected to natural. With a strong vision, the support and engagement of the community, and an absolute commitment to best use and sustainability, the Holland Board of Public Works took on a job that will benefit the community for decades to come.
So we're very excited about where we are in this point. The power plant is actually online. We are actually generating power with it. We're going through a series of tests. There's some contractual obligations that both the equipment manufacturers have and the contractors have to meet performance guarantees. And so that's kind of where we are in that process. So here, see some other pictures. I'm going to try to move through these quickly to make sure we have time. We did set up an observation platform. Many of you may have taken advantage of that. And that was very well used and a lot of good conversations that took place, out there. Here's some other pictures of the construction, as we moved along. This is the visitor center. This is the area, that red spine that you see going left to right is a corridor. And this is sort of a spread open view of that. But up and down there will be exhibits that will have interactive and static exhibits, so tour groups can come and learn about energy, learn about the plant, learn about some of the history, learn about what they can do in their home to be more efficient. And so we're very excited about being able to take advantage of that. There's also apertures that look into the, or windows, storefront, tall windows actually, that look into the control room, look into different parts of the plant along that spine. So that'll be opening around late September, early October of this year. Another view of that and some of the work. Again, that was a collaborative process, engaged the education community quite a bit on that as we went through that. Also want to talk a little bit as we move past power, what's going on downtown on fiber. BPW has been in the fiber optic business for a couple decades now. We've actually supplied some of the bigger businesses in town with fiber connections. We have not been the internet service provider though. We don't provide the content, at least we haven't to date. We partner with internet service providers to do that. There's been a lot of interest in what we can do with the residential sector and with some of the smaller businesses. And so we're exploring some new technology or newer technology that will allow us to be more cost effective in that. We had a pilot in our downtown area that we did with a couple buildings, the Lokers building, the Butch's building, and the Riverview building rather, I should say, and then a couple coffee houses where we did some Wi-Fi down there. It was gigabit So what does that mean? Well, that's 1,000 megabits per second. So very, very fast type of speed. And that's the kind of thing that some of our businesses downtown have been craving for. And so we set up a pilot down there, and now we're looking at rolling that out further through the downtown area, covering blocks from like Lincoln all the way down to Pine and 7th and 9th Street with the deployment of fiber later this year. We also, as part of that, are looking at becoming an internet service provider ourselves so that we could provide an alternative. We still want to provide an open network, though, that others can serve their services across. And so the pilot was last year. Now we're expanding it this year. We hopefully will be done with that construction by late summer so that we can be deploying it and getting people hooked up in the downtown area in September of this year. Another short video real quick is coming up showing the result of some of the experience that one of the property owners had downtown.
Collective Idea is a small 25-person software development company. We do custom software for Fortune 100 companies, small startups both locally and in Silicon Valley and all over the world. We don't have servers in our office. Our servers are in the cloud, whether that's somewhere on the West Coast or somewhere overseas or in a client's office. We have to be connecting to those from here so that we can do what we need to do. It is efficiency. We don't really think about the times we're waiting for websites to load, for downloads to happen, but that little bit of time adds up all the time, and especially in our business where we are always connected. The BPW fiber has been a connection that's much better than we could have afforded otherwise. We're nerds, so the first thing we did is test everything out. How can we really saturate this thing and put it through its paces? And we couldn't do it. We couldn't fill it up. We couldn't saturate that connection. It just didn't happen. We do a lot of video communication with our clients, whether they're in California or in Bahrain or anywhere. We need to be able to see them, see reactions. It's so much better to have a face-to-face conversation. That makes us look better. We can do things faster. We aren't having problems. We aren't apologizing for our internet connection all the time. And it also helps people want to come here, want to be in our office, employees and customers. And that's a great selling point for us as a company. This is huge for Holland, both to attract businesses, but really to help the ones that are already here. We are so much more efficient today than where we were, and we haven't had to worry about any sort of outages or slowdowns. A lot of times we're connected over a secure connection to the West Coast. Can we make that go a lot faster? Do software updates download a lot faster? And the answer is yes. Everything yes. It's so much better, so much faster, and completely reliable.
So we're real excited about what the next step is with that, and there'll be a much greater conversation as we look at taking it beyond the downtown. Some challenges associated with that from a financing perspective and getting the assurance of the capital recovery on that, but it's going to be an important conversation, and we'll have a community conversation again about that. Moving on to water reclamation, this is our nice way of saying wastewater. We've made significant upgrades there. I don't know if many of you know, but one of our biggest sectors in the community is food processing. So with food processing, a lot of times you get some higher strength wastes that come down the road. And so we want to make sure that we were ready for that. We've made about a $20 million upgrade in our wastewater plant this year to help with that. I have some booklets on your tables. I also have more on the center table here. It's called How It Works. And so I'll hold that up right here, but if you have that, it's kind of nice because it shows you inside, please pass it around your table, but it shows you how each of our utility functions operates, and wastewater is an interesting process. We think we do it really well because we're on a compact footprint, and we needed to try to find a way of increasing our capacity, and we did that with our $20 million investment without adding any new footprint. We added about 30% treatment capacity to the plant. We also helped an end-of-life situation with some of our biosolids handling. These are screw presses here. Yes, they squeeze what's left over, and then you take it to a area to dump that. So probably not a lot of good conversation to have about wastewater. But again, the key here is that we're ready for our industries and for our community growth. and we're making those investments ahead of time rather than being caught behind. And so here's a few other pictures of the equipment going in there. And again, some of the top users are those food processors that I mentioned before. Also, a key element of collaboration, the city of Wyoming recently made an upgrade up the road here at their water plant on 168th in New Holland. They added about 30 million gallons a day of treatment capacity. And our plant has a 38.5 million gallon a day total capacity of our plant. We're not quite at our limit yet. I think our peak day last year was around 32 million gallons per day. Our average day, though, is around 11, because everybody's irrigating in the summer. And so what we did is we added about a 4 or 5 mile line connecting our system to Wyoming's system, a 30-inch line that allows us to get reliable service in case one plant or the other has a problem. We can actually back each other up, with that line on most days. Additionally, when we look to the future, because they've made the investment in their capacity, we could actually buy supplemental water if we ran out of capacity in our plant. Instead of making a significant capital investment in a new plant, we could simply, add in some of the additional water from this new line that we have now put in. So I think that's a real cost-effective approach that's thinking outside the box and thinking in terms of collaboration with other communities. So we definitely wanted to highlight that. It's right at the interconnection point is at their facility, but it goes down 160th actually and connects into our system at Perry. I also want to mention a couple things that are new for you. We have upgraded our metering in our community. We actually one of the first adopters for automated metering back in 2003 or 2004 timeframe. So we're actually on our second generation of metering, and part of this new metering will give you additional tools to use and help us also. And part of that has to do with you being able to see your usage, as well as us being able to see when you're off. And so many of you hopefully don't experience power outages. We have a very good track record for power outages, but I have one over here that did. Hopefully it was short. So one out of the room, that's a good statistic, I guess. If you have a power outage and you're interested in what the status of that is, on our website we have an outage map. And that outage map now will show the area that's affected by that outage, and we update that as our crews are working on it to allow you to understand what the situation looks like. Also, because of the new metering, you have the ability to look at your usage. And this is part of our energy efficiency programs, trying to empower the customers to see when they're using something at what times and maybe make some corrective action on that. If you see your use spike up, maybe you've got a pump that's running. Maybe you've got a sump pump that's running a lot because you've got a toilet that's leaking by or something. All these different tools are things that you could take a look at and get some ability to then maybe take action yourselves on things. So those are some things that are happening as well on the customer side. I wanted to leave a little bit of time, and I'm happy to stay. If you have a hard stop, I'm sorry, but if not, I'm going to try to stay as long as you want to and answer any questions that you have.
I have a concern about security on the property.
At the new power plant, so the concern is about security. We do have a secure perimeter around that. So back at the image you saw, there is a secure fence that's there, and we will have that. We'll have cameras, other things that are going on with that. But we did want to incorporate an area outside of that, and so it's always a balancing act associated with security, especially these days when you think about some of the activities going on in the world. We assess the risk and consequence associated with that in context of the larger grid. If somebody wanted to really do something very destructive to the grid, the grid as a whole, Holland wouldn't be the place to really focus your efforts. Now that being said, we don't want to be cavalier about it at all, and I don't think we have. We're just going to manage it in such a way where we've got the secure perimeter and then we've got the access outside. And if you're going to visit the visitor center, that's going to be a coordinated activity that'll be during certain hours, and we'll have people to make sure that people are moving between the secure perimeter and into the facility in a safe manner. Yeah, it's a good question.
Question.
Yes.
What's the facility going up across the street from the James DeYoung plant?
Great question. Across the street from the James DeYoung plant is a substation, electrical substation. You might say, why is an electrical substation going across from the James DeYoung plant? Because when the James DeYoung plant was first built in the 1940s and then later in the 50s and 60s when plants were added, generation was added there, The circuit serving the downtown area came directly out of that facility. And since we're moving away from that plant, we needed to have a different way of distributing the power out of our system to each of those customer areas of town. And so the substation kind of takes the place of that. And we also decided to move it into the other side of the street, because ultimately, if something is reused in that plant or the plant comes down entirely, it frees up the entire west side of Pine Avenue in doing so. Great question. Yes?
My question is for the future. I'm very happy with what's going on here. But I'm an artist, and there are other artist eyes in here, and I'm wondering if someday Holland will address all the power lines and telephone poles that we have.
That's a great question. We have done that over time. As one of the big projects, 7th Street, 9th Street was a big change where we went underground with a lot of that area. I think there's discussion going on as it relates to 6th Street eventually, looking at that. So we'll be kind of growing some of that. All of our anything new that we put in is all underground. We don't really put anything new in overhead. The caveat on that is that when we looked at our fiber optic deployment plan and we looked at something wider, we said we would follow whatever the electric is. So if the electric's underground, we'll go underground. If the electric's overhead, we'll go overhead. Now that's, again, a decision that we'll have to make when we actually get to the longer range deployment of that. But at least for this expanded pilot area, it's in that 7th and 9th Street area, that'll be underground, when we do that. So certainly hear that, and it also helps us too from a reliability standpoint when it goes underground. You decrease the amount of wildlife activity or trees, that could fall into some of the branches as well. So, part of it has to do with, how we're keeping up with the reliability of those areas. There's some life on a lot of those circuits yet, but when we get to end of life, I think we'll be making some decisions in other areas of the town too, and potentially converting other areas as we go forward.
I've got a question.
Yes.
You have all these wonderful trails around this area. Are they bike friendly?
Yes, they'll be asphalt. Yes, they will. And there was a question about whether they should be snow melted, and we said no on that because there's other uses for the snow melt. But also, we hope that we can pack it down in the wintertime and maybe even have cross-country skiers, use that. So, yeah. Great question. I think there's a question up here, Andre. There's one over there. Oh, hang on one second. I'll come right back to you. I think Andre's going to bring a mic. You have a question over here.
Yeah, right here. You produce a wonderful product that every one of us uses every single day. Some of us want to use even more of your product. I'm in a group, we're buying electric vehicles, electric cars.
Yes.
We're very excited about that with the Bolt coming out this summer. And here in Holland, we have the largest car battery factory in the United States producing the batteries for that. So we're helping the community and so on. Now, we're going to need a lot of electricity for these things. We want to charge them in our homes. Some of the utilities provide chargers for electric car users so that we can charge the cars at night when you have extra capacity. Are you going to be in the business of providing chargers, 220 or whatever, for these electric cars?
Yeah, so I think the question is about chargers in the home, and some of the utilities have some programs where they are offering rebates associated with that. So you make an investment, you can get something back from that. What we have done here in Holland is we actually funded about 17 charging stations, public charging stations, instead. So what we did is said, instead of taking an individual user contribution type of thing, we said that we're going to invest in the 17 charging stations around the community that can be used. Not to say that we won't in the future, look at that in terms of a rebate in the home. I would want to point out, though, compared to the other utilities, when you are charging it, you're paying about 25% less per kilowatt hour in your charging than the other utilities, because just we have that kind of advantage on the residential level compared to consumers' energy. That being said, I think it's something that we're going to have to look at, because we are, a proponent of the growth in the electric vehicles, and having the industry here in town is something that we do want to support. Don't have it right on the horizon here, but I would say that it's something that we will continue to look at. Yes, sir.
Yes. Are you familiar with London's conversion of their power plant, downtown power plant, into an art museum?
I'm not. I've heard of other conversions, but not that one.
And it's marvelous because you've got the high ceiling. You can do all sorts of stuff with that artistically wise.
I think it would be a wonderful facility for some alternative use, because if you took out the equipment in the center of it, it kind of provides a mezzanine, like you said, multiple levels within it. You could have, whether it's offices outside or restaurant outside, or, I'm sort of thinking about it, but it's really got to be a community decision, about what we do there. All I'm trying to encourage is that, let your voices be heard about it. It's going to be something that's going to be a lot broader than the BPW, making some decision about it. And so, we want to make sure that those voices are heard. I think I've heard Austin, one of the city councilmen went down to Austin, Texas, and there was a power plant there that had been converted to restaurants and some other office space, and it was a really neat environment. He ate in what's called Boiler Number 9 restaurant, so it was kind of neat. So
We have time for one more question.
right here there was one, Andre. Oh, okay. She is waiting too. Maybe I'll take two if I can. Go ahead.
Okay, your video showed the impressive improvements you've done to the eastern gateway, but the northern gateway goes over river by the wastewater plant, and depending on the weather conditions, it can be very smelly and over a very large area. Is there anything that can be done about that?
Yeah, actually, it's something that we tried to get the public information out over the last year and a half here that we've been doing the $20 million upgrade. Along the way, we had to take the odor control out of service from time to time, and we had other pieces of equipment that were open, so we couldn't have a seal. The way the odor control works is it actually draws the air off from the smellier parts of the process, which is the primary treatment when it first comes into the plant, and then our sludge hauling areas. And because of the renovation work that we were doing, putting in the new sludge presses and other upgrades that we were doing along there, it wasn't a perfect seal all the time, and so we had some situations there. We would tell, the radio station obviously knew because they were right next door to us, but we would still inform the downtown that we had a period of time where we were going to be in this stage. Now that work is wrapping up, the odor control should be working a lot more consistently, a lot better. Actually, we upgraded the odor control process in this project as well, so that should be an improvement on that.
Dave will be available out in the atrium immediately following the meeting.
Can you, if I can maybe, she's been waiting, asking about.
Just quickly, is that a Peregrine Falcon box on top of the building?
Oh, we do not have a Falcon box right now. It was a great question. Grand Haven has one. I'm not sure our height is going to be enough there for that. It's a 160-foot tall stack. But I know that other power plants have had some success with that, but I don't think we're planning on that in ours right now. So, I know. Yeah.
We do have additional copies. They'll be out in the lobby. If you'll join me in thanking Dave, we're really fortunate.
Thank you very much.